Hi, it's Emily Leapart from Art from the Heart, and in this video I'll be using Paper Smooch's stamps and dies to show you how to use 2 or 3 dies together to create a single panel. When I made this card for the Wicked Not Cool release, I had a lot of requests for a tutorial on this technique, so I'm going to show you how I combine the sailboat die and Borders 1 die to create the top panel, which is one complete panel. It's seamless, so it looks really cool like a single die cut. I'll show you how to get the image and sentiment centered on your card. Then you can color and embellish it with your choice of pattern paper or custom background. I made a similar one prior to that using the Brinny Blue release, except at the time I made the card there were no dies for the Brinny Blue stamp set. You can see that the tail is joined to the water panel. Even though the dolphin is a separate piece here, tucked in behind the water, I'm also going to show you how you can put 2 images on the horizon. Keep in mind that your card needs to run through the die cutting machine both directions. First to cut the images and then to cut the borders on either side. It's important to note that your card can only be as tall as the width of your machine. In my Wicked Not Cool card, the sentiment gets cut by going through the machine top down, leaving the bottom section uncut. For those of you who are new to manual die cutting machines, leaving part of a die uncut means that both of the 2 cutting plates do not meet against the die in that area. The plates can only be offset lengthwise and not widthwise. For your projects, all you need is a stamp set or 2 that have coordinating dies for the images. Some examples are Enchanted Elves, Giddy Gumdrops, and Freezy Fellas, but there are so many more. Once you get started, you won't be able to stop. Next, you'll need some Borders dies, or perhaps just an X-Acto knife if you don't have any Borders dies. Here I have both the Borders 1 bundle that I use a lot and also the brand new Borders 2 bundle. Any of these will do. In my samples I'll be using this Borders 1 die because it can be grass, mud, snow, water, or even cloud lining. I absolutely love this die because it's so versatile. For my first card I'll use the Boy Elf from Enchanted Elves. This piece of cardstock is cut at 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, which is just slightly smaller than the average A2 sized card. The Wicked Not Cool card has more space around the edges and the card is cut narrower. I thought I'd go for a slightly different look this time. The first thing I'm going to do is center the elf die and sentiment together as one unit. It's important to choose your sentiment ahead of time so you know how much space it will take up on the panel. I'm going to use the There's No One Elf Like You, so I have to make sure that the elf die is high enough on the panel to accommodate the sentiment below it. I make sure that I leave the same amount of space above the elf's head as below the last line of the sentiment. They also need to be lined up vertically down the center of the card. Once I determine where they need to be, I can take some washi tape and hold the die in place on the panel. Then you'll put your top plate on the section that you want to cut, which is most of the die from the top down. You can determine where you want your ground level to be on the die. You can always run it through the machine again if it doesn't cut enough. It takes a bit of trial and error. I want the ground level to be at the bottom of the elf's shirt, and you'll see that it doesn't cut far down enough the first time I run it through the machine, so I just move the plate down a bit more and run it through a second time. Now that it's die cut the way I want it, I can go ahead and remove the die and washi tape. Then I set the card in the die cut machine in the other direction and grab the border die I want to use. The card needs to be turned 90 degrees from the previous cut since the border die is long and can't run through the machine in the prior direction. What I do next is use the sharp end of the border die to find the edge of the elf. Sometimes it doesn't meet up perfectly and you have to use scissors or a knife to complete the cut, but that's okay. Once you have the die in place, hold it down with some washi tape and run it through the machine. This time you want it to cut the entire way so you don't have to offset the plates. Next, move the die and repeat on the other side. After your 3 cuts have been completed, you have your single panel. Now I will stamp the elf and sentiment on the die cut. Just before stamping the sentiment, I had an idea that is different from my sailboat sample, where I left the base plain. I'm going to die cut a mask of the elf to show you how you can sponge the bottom of the panel to create a completely different look for your card. This isn't the best cardstock for sponging with distress inks, but I chose it before I had the idea, so you'll have to bear with me. After the sponging is done, I go ahead and stamp the sentiment in place. And here I'm laughing at myself because I grabbed Memento ink to stamp the elf for Copic coloring when in fact I had already stamped the elf. The mask did such a great job of covering him up that I totally forgot. So that first panel is done, and after coloring him I will assemble this panel with some pattern paper on a card base. For my second card, I'm going to use the Giddy Gumdrop set to create a card with 2 partially die-cut images on the horizon. It's just as easy as the first card. You just choose the 2 images that you want and place them side by side on your panel. Here, I had to make sure that I had the boy and girl in the correct places since they lean into each other. Again, choose your sentiment and center all 3 elements in the center of the panel. Tape down the dies and run it through the machine with the top plate offset to where you want the dies to stop cutting. Remove the dies, turn the card 90 degrees, find the edge of the gingerbread girl with the border die, tape it down and run it through the machine with both plates together. Then repeat on the other side. In this video, I stamped the gingerbread couple first, but I would actually recommend cutting apart the section between them and removing that upper piece before stamping. It was difficult to see the die edges without the black mat in the background, so I wasn't able to stamp the gingerbread boy in the center of the die. Afterwards, I took an X-Acto knife and created my own snow bumps between the couple and completely detached that top piece from the panel. To stamp the sentiment, I pulled Sending Good Cheer from the same stamp set. Instead of using the lines and the edge of the card to line it up perfectly, I just hovered it above the edge of the card and dragged it up to where I wanted it stamped. To complete both of these cards, I used Copic markers to color the images, and I used pattern paper from Studio Calico's magical paper pad for the backgrounds. I added a little glitter bow and pearl necklace to the gingerbread couple for a bit of embellishment. The top panels are always adhered to the card base with foam tape to emphasize their uniqueness. Because I sponged around the mask for the elf, it looks as if he's a die cut placed on top of the snowy blue panel, but the recipient will notice that it's flat. It's a nice illusion, and the white space works in place of a shadow stamp. I used my Wink of Stella marker on the pom-pom and gift to add some sparkle to this image. I made a third card off camera as an example of a non-holiday card in the same style. The dog is from Whiffers and Tweeters, and the sentiment is from Cutosaurus. You could put 2 dogs or even 2 dinosaurs on the horizon. You could even use clouds and moons from Cosmos and reverse it so that the large portion of the panel is at the top of the card with the images hanging down from it. The possibilities for this technique are really endless. I hope this gives you some ideas on how to combine your dies for some creative fun. I will have another video in the future showing you yet more ideas for this technique. Thanks so much for watching.